If you've ever started writing your next line in a scene while your scene partner was still talking, you might have been doing a couple things in that, right? You might have been trying to get out ahead of some kind of pause. You might have been trying to eliminate a pause that you thought might happen. Maybe you wanted to be a really fast improviser. Maybe you saw an improv team that was just super fast once and you thought that looked really cool and you wanted to be like that. Fair enough. It can kind of sort of work. You might get your response out on time. Maybe it will make sense, even with missing what they said. And maybe nobody noticed any gap between those lines. And they thought that it was really fast improv. But at that same time, right, this is the problem. You might have missed a good chunk of what your scene partner actually gave you. You might have missed a really important offer. And that's a pretty big trade-off. It's a pretty big risk in a craft that is based entirely on listening. So that's the thing that I want to get into in this episode, is that beat, that pause that happens between an offer and the response that you give to that offer. I want to talk about what happens between those two improv lines. What is it? What is this pause? What people think it means when they watch you take one. This could be the audience, it could be your teacher, your scene mate, and what you can actually do to make those pauses really, really good, to make them read how you want, which is going to also make them really, really good. Welcome to Your Improv Brain. This is your home for cognitive improv nerdery. I'm Jen deHaan. In this episode, we're talking about those pauses, those juicy pauses, how to make them really good. Really good as juicy pauses. How to let those pauses turn our scenes into really good improv. Improv. It's something about receiving. It's a receiving activity first before anything else. Somebody says a thing, and then you take in that thing into your noggin. And then you respond out of that noggin to that thing that they actually said, what they actually said, the whole offer. Now, this thing sounds pretty simple when you reduce it down to those strange sentences. But it's actually a really hard skill to keep available in your head under all that pressure. And that might be why we take so many classes and levels and stuff. Now, in between those two moments, there is a gap. There is a beat. That's the same thing. A beat is like a pause. It's a pause of some sort. And now, beats, pauses, gaps between sentences, they're there in every scene, for every person, for every improv player. And usually nobody's noticing them. Nobody thinks about these things because for a lot of improvisers in a lot of scenes, these pauses are really short, right? They just kind of disappear into the rhythm, the cadence of the dialogue and the scene itself. However, when those pauses stop being short, people start noticing them, right? We start noticing them. The audience might notice a pause that's longer. And now that noticing can go different ways, right? It can be positive. It can be negative. Most of the time it's just neutral. That's when it kind of disappears into everything. And that's good too, right? So it depends on how you do that pause. They can be positive, they can be negative. So is that pause, is it like a hesitation? Or like, is the improviser blanking out and freezing? I have a whole bunch of videos about that and things that you can do in those situations. I'll put a link in the description. And now that pause could be another type. It could be a juicy pause. It could be loaded with stuff. That could be a very good pause. So the way that improv teaching and us improvisers, when we're learning especially, or we're trying something new, or we're with new people, new situation, new theater, a lot of times in these cases, that pause is kind of read or taken as some kind of confidence problem. So in this case, you might be getting a note if you're learning from a teacher or you have a coach. You seemed unsure in this particular moment that they would then point out. Or they might just give you a note, hey, commit faster, or trust your first instinct. Just say the first thing that comes out of your mouth, right? That's like the lessons that I gave in some of those freezing videos. They might be giving you something in that genre. They might be treating you like you didn't know what to do or what to say in that moment. Or something else that might happen is maybe your scene partner thought that you weren't sure in that moment. They thought that maybe what they said didn't make sense. So they start filling in the pause for you. Oh no, right? Or, I mean, that could also come from a confidence thing on their end, right? Like I've been in scenes with improvisers that they clearly didn't know if what they said made sense or whatever. They kept adding on and on, right? So every one of these notes or reactions assumes something kind of specific about what's happening inside your own head during that particular silence. They're assuming that that silence that you had was like hesitation of some sort. They thought that you were an unsure improviser. And some of us really don't like assumptions, right? Or at least those assumptions, because in some cases, they might be thinking that, reading that from you, and that's not the case of what's going on in your head, because there could be different stuff. And now there's stuff. To keep up with that overused word now, there's stuff we can do about all of this. Thank God for stuff. So let's talk about the different types of pauses, the different types. And there are at least two very different things that can produce a very similar outward look. So one of those things is just genuinely not having a thing to say, right? This is the case, the common case, the case that's often assumed is that your brain went blank, that the thing that your scene partner just said didn't register, perhaps. Maybe you're stalling. Maybe there's some kind of pressure that you're responding to. Now, the other pause that can happen is that offer that your scene partner gave, whatever they just said, is still arriving in your noggin. You heard those words. You heard what they said. They're still being processed. So the meaning of that phrase is still assembling in your head. And maybe you're 3/4 of the way through that processing work in your noggin, and you're just trying to finish up what sentence you want to blurt out in another second or two. And this is very common for neurodivergent improvisers. We have auditory processing needs at times or other processing delays, and this can affect how fast we respond to some offers in a scene. Now, in these two cases, it can be a fairly similar kind of silence, but internally, they are completely different situations that are going on. And the audience will oftentimes fill that silence with some kind of reason or some kind of assumption. And I'm including the audience, could be the other people on the stage, or it could be the actual audience up in seats in the theater, because this is what brains do with ambiguous situations. And this one can be a little bit ambiguous. And so this is when your teammates and your teacher, usually with that note that they're going to give you, this is why they tend to say hesitation, because it can be a little bit ambiguous seeming. So now there's the third type of pause that happens on stage. And this is the intentional pause. So this is the juicy pause. This is the good type of pause. This is the one that is filled with stuff. So think of this kind of pause as a dramatic pause. This is where the silence itself is carrying the meaning. This is the pause where it is probably, hopefully, clear to everyone that you have something. Your character has something, and you're adding to the scene by adding this silence. this is what we want to aim for. More on this in a bit. So once you've been told a few times that you look hesitant, you might end up trying to solve for this condition. And the most common solution, the one that, well, probably not everyone teaches you because it's not something that you really want to do in improv, but almost everybody arrives at on their own, quite naturally, is to start building your response while your partner is still speaking. That's what I talked about right at the top of this episode. And now this, technically, it can work because you aren't going to get that pause in there when you're doing something like this, right? You're responding quickly. You're coming in on time. You sound really decisive. You sound like you knew what you wanted to say. Hey, there was no hesitation there. But then you might start getting a new note from that coach that you're writing the scene. Because there's still a tell when you do that. Because that's technically what is happening. You're only kind of half listening, sort of, to what your scene partner's saying. So the line that you're coming in with hot is a line that you could have said in almost maybe any scene, because it's a little bit generic. And if that's the case, then you also might hear notes like you don't seem present or you're in your head. And probably you're going to hear something else like react to your partner more, which is actually just kind of the same note, just wearing a different hat. Because that's the other thing. You aren't reacting to what they said last, like the last thing that they said. You're actually reacting to the beginning of what they said or earlier on in that phrase or in that paragraph of speech that they gave. Or maybe even something a little bit before that, depending on how your brain works. So then you start working on your presence, because that's the new note, right? And you're working on your reactions and being in your head. And you're consciously trying not to write your scenes or plan something for later to fill those gaps, which might make you even more in your head in the end. And that's a worse place to be overall, because that means the improv isn't fun anymore. I mean, that's not fun improv. So processing is another thing too. Auditory processing delay, as one example of processing differences, is common in autistic and ADHD people, and it can mean the words arrive fine, right? You understand everything. It's just the meaning takes a little bit longer to assemble for some people. Working memory can be a part of all of this too. If your scene partner is giving you like a really long, detailed offer, maybe there's like 4 pieces of information in it, like holding all 4 of those things in your head while you kind of decode and decide what to do with them, that can take a lot of effort. And that effort often takes time if you choose to take in all of that information. Now, more on that in a second. We aren't going to forget that bit. And anyways, that time that you're taking to do all that shows up as a pause. So the adjustment you want to make in your improv isn't about making your processing faster, because you probably can't. And the whole like just be quicker instruction or note that you're getting is asking you to fix the one thing that isn't really available for a fix. So what can you actually do? Good question. I'm not going to leave you hanging. So improv already has a name for this pause. Like it's a beat. Well, it has a lot of names. Improv has different names wherever you go, like different theaters. You're going to get different terminology and different names and people trying to create phrases. I've done that here. I've done it too. I'm guilty of this anyways. A pause, a beat, whatever you want to call it. And when a confident performer takes one of these things, that's when we're calling it a choice. Wow, that choice was filled with intention. Oh, I loved that juicy pause. The silence itself is the same either way, right? Like technically the sound base, there's no sound coming out of your mouth, but the rest of it isn't the same. This is expressed a lot through physicality. It can also be expressed through your vocal choices before, or even if you can make a noise or something. So this is all about like energy and body position, your characterization, embodying your character. So the useful question is probably what you can put into that beat. That might be the useful question for you. So it's reading as a choice. It might have been a choice. It doesn't have to be a choice. It can be a hesitation. It just has to read as a choice. Acting. So the simple part of the answer here is mostly about your face and your body. Could also be about a little bit about your vocal stuff too, depending on how you want to play this one out. So a pause with a reaction in it of some sort is usually reading as some kind of character, person, whatever, having a response already there, right? So a pause that doesn't have any of those things in it can read like a character or a person who just doesn't have something available. So the audience is watching you more than they're they're not setting up a timer on their watch or something about your pause. So if your face is like doing something while you process, like maybe it's showing some surprise or some suspicion or just delight or some slow dawning of like, you did what? That kind of, but just on your face, right? All of that stuff. Maybe it's just like a shift of energy in your space work or whatever. There's something there. Then even when there's nothing there, I just want to keep saying that. There doesn't have to be something there. It just has to look like there's something there. Then that silence, it carries all of that information. And then like all of that information is just that's juicy stuff, right? Like your scene partners can be like, oh, they have something. And then they're going to wait for you and they're not going to try to fill that in. Some of the best beats in improv are silent, have no noise coming out of your mouth, and a lot longer than the ones that you like. Like this can be so much longer than your natural hesitation. You might be hesitating. This is going to buy you time to think, right? They're good. And then those notes are going to be like, oh, that was a good one. So the move is to react or at least show something physically before you respond verbally, and to let that reaction be the first thing that happens. It's an offer too. So you're basically telling everyone, your scene partner, the audience, your coach, I have something. It's being told with your energy, with your body, instead of your voice. It can also be subtle. It can be small. It doesn't have to be like that big, crappy, like dramatic stuff that I just did back there, right? Like this can be small, but it does have to communicate. And this has another benefit too, because if you're giving some kind of physical reaction to what your scene partner just said, it forces you to keep listening very actively. And it might also help you process if it is a processing delay. Now, I covered silence and pauses as a chosen dramatic tool back in another episode that I will link. Now, for all the different things potentially going on under the hood in your noggin, if this is a case where you're like, say, given that short monologue with 4 different things to process instead of one thing, you can always opt, it's an option to you, to just take the last thing that they said. So you can drop those first 3 things, for example, if you really can't process them, and just take the 4th thing as the thing that you work with. And then you and your scene partner can work out the rest. So if one of those 3 things that you dropped was really important to the scene, your scene partner who said it will have your back on making that work in the scene. Or in either case, or in any case, you don't know what to do with your brain that froze, you didn't understand, or they gave you too much info, you can always ask a question in improv while staying in character. That's totally legitimate and allowed. So these things are always an option, because adding all of those details is something for your scene partner to work on after the scene, as not adding too much in what they say, not delivering those monologues. Your job is just to stay in character, really, and give them that juicy pause and then roll on. That pause is not going anywhere, even the hesitation ones. But it can be an excellent addition to your scenes. Those are great. You're going to make that choice even when you aren't hesitating to add that pause. Adding space in a scene is great. Now, there are a couple of ways it can look on the outside. It can look like hesitation, but there's several things that might be happening on the inside. It might not be hesitation. And those things and appearances can get interpreted quite differently than the reality. And if your scene partner does have something and is intentionally taking that juicy pause, know that you will usually, maybe not always, but quite often, you're going to be able to tell. Even if subtext is tough for you, you're probably going to be able to tell in your gut. Also, before I do go, I want to give a quick shout out to Susie Barrett, another great improv podcaster who called a pause juicy pauses. This was her note, and it never left my brain when I heard that note come over to her mouth. I don't even remember who it was for. It might have been me. It might have been someone else. Anyways, I love the phrase, and so I've kept it. So good ones, good pauses are now juicy. So just passing that along to your brain. Now you might not forget it, even if you don't like the phrase. Sorry, and you're welcome. Oh, wait, we're doing confidence in this episode. I mean, you're welcome. So if you do want to work on those pauses with other people and confidence, I run off-script sessions monthly. They're built for this kind of thing, for practicing our confidence and practicing good stuff in scenes. Links in the description. Bye for now.